So there we were on a long canoe trip through the boundary waters of Canada, and we'd made some extra time and had a day off to recuperate. So we were lying in our tents to keep the mosquitoes off of us when my buddy smelled something really foul. He opened his eyes and he was staring into the face of a black bear. That's why this show is about how to protect yourselves from bears. And we've got a special Alaskan to help us out on this episode of Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast. Special guest is an Alaskan. Not only that, but he is a solo Alaskan hunter who has had many encounters with bears. Morris Milani. He's also a machinist, and he builds parts for guns to make them work better for bear hunting and bear protection. Morris, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me over here. Appreciate
it. Not a problem. It didn't cost me all that much to fly you down here. So.
It was worth the time. Yeah, so what would you like to talk about, the bear cartridges?
Boy, I want to hear mostly about your bear attacks and your friends and what kind of incidents actually happen. So many folks down in the lower 48 want to go to Alaska or northern Canada or someplace where there are grizzlies, and they think there's one behind every bush and you're all going to get attacked and you constantly have to be defending yourself. I want a reality check. What actually happens up there?
A reality check, it depends on the season and the size of the bear, and it doesn't have to be a big bear. Often it is not a large bear. It can be a subadult. It can be a cub that mama just kicked out of the nest. Could be, my friend of mine was charged by a grizzly when he was hunting caribou because the caribou populations were down. He didn't have any food, and so he put him on the menu. Had a friend charged by a bear when he was checking his bait because the bear had mentally taken possession. That was their food, and they were not going to tolerate that. So just being aware, I think, is critical. And the fact that you see a bear wandering around doesn't mean it's a threat. And that's critical, too.
Well, that brings up a good point. If you see the bear, he's not a threat. He's just doing his thing, right? He's out eating berries or looking for something to eat. You don't have to panic right away.
It helps if you never panic. You just be prepared.
Be prepared instead of panic.
Right.
Okay, well, what are some examples of friends and you, whoever, who did have an altercation with a bear? I mean, if you're always alert and you're sensible, you try not to get into trouble with bears, but you hear enough attacks out of nowhere. It's just like all of a sudden the bear is on you. That happens.
Oh, absolutely. And it's very thick cover. I mean, sometimes even trying to recover a bear, because a brown bear, once it's hit, it'll always circle. It waits.
Oh, really?
Every time. It's waiting for you someplace. And so give them a half an hour and you use a lot of caution. But I skinned a bear for a friend of ours. I do the caping for our little group of hunters and my own bears. And every single bear we shoot, we cape and treat it like a trophy. Someday we will get that 10.5 footer. We'll know how to do it. But respect the animal. And so a friend of mine, first bear, he said, I just got a bear. And he brings it over. And what had happened was he and his son were checking the bait. His son was at the bait, refilling it. He was about 30 yards away. And a black bear just came out of the woods and just made a beeline for his son. It didn't growl. It just kind of slouched down and went straight for his son.
Fast?
Yes. And so he shot that bear 10 or 15 yards from his son. And it was about 125-pound 3-year-old sow. It wasn't a big bear.
Just a little bear.
Just a little one. But she decided that was hers, and she wasn't going to tolerate that.
Yeah.
So it was a nice little bear, but nonetheless, it would have been something for it to contend with.
Sure.
At that range. So he was just to be aware and always smelling, always looking, always listening. Just be aware where you are.
I suspect a lot of this stuff, a few of the fellas that I have talked with that have been attacked by bears, and one got run up a tree and almost pulled him out of it. But it's always the sound. It seems like they've heard this. I heard the brush crackling or something like that.
And they like the heavier cover, and where you wouldn't think they would be. And it's amazing what they can get through for the size of their bodies. They're low to the ground and look low to the ground. Even a big black bear isn't tall. They're pretty short animals. Not much bigger than like a Newfoundland dog or something. They're not huge animals.
That brings up an interesting point. A lot of folks will say the smart bear hunter who gets attacked gets down on a knee to shoot. Because if the bear is charging you and you're standing, and he gets close to where you know it's like, I'm going to have to shoot him, you shoot over him because he comes under the bullet.
Coming so fast.
Does that make sense?
It does, but like I said, I don't know that I would have time. This is tight quarters with the ferns, especially in June. The ferns are getting pretty high. You know, they start out pretty low, and you can see everywhere. And in a matter of weeks, because of the long days, they're waist high and then chest high. So it's pretty tight quarters. So it's take the shots you can get.
Well, on most of these bear attacks, then, is it generally in heavy cover like that, where you don't have the preview of Mr. Bear is coming?
Some are, but amazingly, some. A friend of mine was hunting rabbits with his bow, and what he would do is he would fly in and land on these benches in his little Super Cub with the cuts in the river, and they're kind of triangular shaped, and he would start at the back and work back and forth, and the rabbits kind of bunch up, and when you get to the point, it's pretty heavy shooting, and you know, a lot of fun. So he had done that, and he started hearing he said there was a pretty stiff headwind. And he kept hearing this crashing and crashing behind him. And when he had turned around, there was a grizzly bear that broke through the cover and was coming straight for him. It could smell him. It knew he was there, and it was coming right for him. And this was kind of mid-October. So the fish were gone. It was kind of a last meal type thing. And so he had a shooting glove on, his archery glove. When he reached for his pistol, he dropped his pistol.
Oh.
And he had a 629, a stainless steel Smith & Wesson 3-inch. And so he said he picked it up, and as the bear got to him, he fired. He said it was about 7 or 8 feet, fired and turned the bear a little bit, and then as the bear ran by him, he got 2 more in it.
So the first shot turned the bear?
Yes.
He hit it?
Yes, he hit it, and he'd done a lot of shooting. He was, you know, as a police officer, he'd done a lot of handgun training. And then he just gathered up his things and got out of there.
He didn't go after the bear.
Not then. Always give him at least a half an hour.
Smart move, huh?
Always at least a half an hour. Got out of there, came back. Because of weather, he couldn't get back for another day or two. And when they recovered it, that bear had indeed circled back to his trail and was waiting for him. And it died there.
Waiting on his back trail?
Yep. It circled back around and was waiting for him.
That's kind of scary.
So he's the one who set up my pistol for me and was very specific on how it needs to function and the features. And he told me he really thought I should get like a 500 line ball or a 500 Smith & Wesson. And just because he was clearly still rattled when he's telling the story, it was, you know, pretty harrowing for him. And so that's why when we do the video on the handgun, that's why he was very specific of these are the things you need on this handgun under these circumstances. So if you do drop it, you can retrieve it with your lanyard. It is accessible. It's always right where you can get to it.
Critical stuff, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And so I think the most critical thing is to be prepared.
Let me tell our audience what we're talking about. Now, this particular setup that Morris is using, his handgun, the caliber, the cartridges, the bullets, the lanyard you said you have on it, and a holster, whatever he is doing, he is going to outline that for us in a video on Ron Spomer Outdoors' regular YouTube channel. So if you want to see a demonstration of this and exactly what the Alaskans have figured out works the best, it's more than just buying a particular brand of rifle and a particular cartridge and using the right bullet. You've got to be able to access that, and it sounds like you've got some special features on this thing that you're working
Absolutely.
with.
And then, Ron, they got to use the gun. They've got to have some trigger time in.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, how many guys miss the shot or shoot poorly because they just didn't get their time in? They didn't put in the work. So get to use it. The 454 Casull for me, I use because I could use the 45 Colt in it.
For practice.
And I ran about 1,000 rounds through it, and the cylinder got all choked up, and so, let it up, and so I cleaned that out, and from then I just used the 454 Casull brass and use reduced loads.
Just loads, yeah.
And get a lot of, but that's we'll cover that in another video.
Sure. I want to hear some more bear attack stories.
Well, there's one that just scares the dickin' out of me because I was laying in my sleeping bag one night, and the bears, they're curious, and they'll kind of punch the tent with their nose.
That'll wake you up.
And so a bear smacked me and ran me over, and I got out, and there was some black form. I think it was just some cubs out there, just curious.
Oh, okay.
And so I just shot my 45. I had the 45 ACP at the time, 1911, and I just fired that. The noise just kind of rattled, and they ran off. And they weren't a threat. They were never. I didn't ever feel physically threatened, but I know when they get curious. I've had a couple of them. They'll claw the tents and tear your tents open.
Yeah.
And so I just I didn't need the damage, and it's just kind of sent them on their way. But a coworker of my buddy was hunting down in southeast Alaska for moose, and laying under a lean-to at night sleeping, and a big brown bear came and grabbed him by his head and drug him out of his head, drug him out of his sleeping bag, and was dragging him off. Thank goodness the bear didn't crush his skull. Well, between the little dog barking and yapping and the wife screaming hysterically, the bear dropped him and ran off. But it did some damage. I mean, it did affect how he looked, and But he had a handgun. He just couldn't get to it. He had rolled over. He had moved around sleeping, as we do. He couldn't get to his gun. Mm-hmm. And so that one kind of rattled me a little bit, because when we're sleeping, that tent isn't that thick, and the bears really aren't deterred by it. So
yeah, that's a funny false security one gets. You get inside of a tent and you think, okay, I'm safe in this tent. That's nothing for a bear.
You're dry. You're not safe. There's a difference.
You're lucky if you keep the rain out, let alone a grizzly.
Yeah, and just another story that kind of had me rattled. A friend of mine was hunting, and his wife was about 20 yards or so behind him, and she was just a tiny little woman, so her rifle, she was just thought it was a little too heavy. It was spring, and they were hunting caribou, so she had put her rifle on her pack and strapped it all down, and she was kind of slogging along behind him, not so close. She didn't want to disturb the game and what he was doing, and she just said, "Bear," and he said when he turned around, he literally just put his muzzle under the bear's chin and fired the shot. It was in season, and he has that bear on his wall. It's a 9-foot, gorgeous silver grizzly.
It's an interior grizzly.
It was an interior grizzly.
9 foot?
Well, but he didn't have any teeth. His teeth were virtually worn out.
Wow.
Well, he was actually a brown bear, but he was just a silver tip, just a gorgeous, gorgeous bear. His teeth were worn out, and that bear knew he was there and went right for him.
So you think it was a predatory attack?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because typically they smell you, they take off. If you're in the stand and they kind of sense you and boom, they're gone.
So he and his wife are just still hunting, looking for caribou.
Meandering through it's kind of the spruce. They're not that big. It's really wet there. And so they're 10, 12-foot trees, and they're kind of scattered apart. So it's fairly open country. And you get a little bush here or there, but it was early in the spring. Yeah, and that bear came right after him. So he did get to keep that one because it was on his license.
He had a tag for it and everything else. He just wasn't expecting it. Now, was this a handgun defense?
No, he actually had it was 30-06.
30-06 rifle.
Yes, and he said it was a Model 54, and just turned around and put it right, just literally lifted the muzzle under the bear's chin, fired.
Was it actually touching the bear when he shot?
He said it was, and he's quite accurate when he speaks, and so I have no doubt that it was right there. If
Close
it wasn't
enough.
Touching, it was within inches. It was right there. The bear was right on him.
Talk about a last-second squeeze on the trigger.
Right. And so to think, I'm going to grab my pistol out, you don't have time. It's like what's in your hand. You're prepared for it mentally. You're not afraid of every shadow, but you're just aware that they're out there. There's a threat, and occasionally you have to deal with it.
Well, I'll hear from a lot of guys who say, why are you fooling around with, you name the rifle, they want to use an AR-15 with a big magazine and then a .458 Bushmaster, a .450. That's usually one they bring up. One of those fatter 45 calibers that you can get in an AR.
Okay.
Because they can get 30 rounds or 20 rounds or something. And I always think you're not going to have an opportunity to pull your trigger that many times.
No, I mean, that bear that close, that's a one shot. And you're falling down, you're going to be shooting at the sky. That was literally one shot. You didn't have the other 29, you were just carrying extra weight.
Yeah, now that earlier incident with a handgun where it came at him and he turned it with the first shot, that was a 44 Rem mag.
Right, that's correct.
And then he got a couple more in it, but effectively that first shot is what saved him from being grabbed.
But what also saved him is his preparation, because he had the right bullets. He didn't have hollow points. He had good solids in there that penetrate deep. He had the right bullets in his gun.
So what some of the bullets you would say are the right bullets for defense handgun?
Well, this is a good example. It's got a nice big me-plat on it, and it's solid lead, good hard lead, at a decent velocity. That's the bullet. You've got to get deep. You've got to get that penetration.
So a flat nose, hard cast lead.
That's absolutely.
Now, a lot of guys will say, why don't you get a full metal jacket bullet? Would that be as good?
Not if it's a round nose. You've got to get the penetration. Also, Ron, remember, these bears, if they're coming out of a river, they've got glacial silt in their hair. They've got mud in their hair. They're wet. There's a thick coat there. It has to penetrate through that. That's like a bulletproof vest. And the bullet's got to get through that. And so many of the hollow points, they're opened up before they even get to the skin.
Oh, yeah. And then what about a spire point? Bad idea.
I'm not feeling that one. I really want them to feel that shock. I really want them to know they're hit.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to turn them. It's a defensive weapon. It's not a hunting weapon. It's strictly change his mind.
Right, yeah. You're not interested in ballistics coefficients and trajectories and all this other stuff. You're just right there.
Right.
So you might as well have that flat nose. And, of course, the flat nose is a reputation for straight line penetration. Doesn't veer off,
And
right?
the vitals are fairly deep on those big bears.
Yeah.
And 18 inches or so to get down to some vitals. To kill them, but you can still turn them. And they can feel that shock and know that they're hit and hit hard. Plus the noise and everything is to your advantage.
Now, do you know Phil Shoemaker?
Oh,
up
of
in
course.
Alaska?
Yeah, done gun work for him.
Yeah, and he did that defense with a 9mm with a hard cast bullet.
Right.
What do you think of someone saying, well, if Phil can do it, I'm just going to take my little compact 9mm up there?
If Phil can do it, Phil can do it. Doesn't mean we can. He's shot a lot of bears. And one thing about Phil is he keeps his wits about him. He stayed calm. He placed his shots. He stayed focused. He was able to do that. And so had he anticipated an encounter, I'm sure he wouldn't have had a 9mm. But he was able to use it successfully because he's done it a lot. And he's been shooting through college and through the military and everything else. So he's got a lot of years and a lot of experiences with bears. And he's just, this is not for the faint of heart. And so I think it's a little foolish to say, geez, this is my favorite pistol, and this is the one I'm going to bring because I really like it. It's like, that's not a good enough reason.
Well, talk about not a good pistol. There's always the argument about whether you should use a revolver or go with an autoloader of some kind. And there's issues about the slide, and if you're up against that bear, you might not be able to get your round to cycle because you've got your muzzle tight against his body and things like that. Is that worth worrying about?
I wouldn't worry about it. You need something. I mean, you've got to have a pistol first. I mean, you have to have something. Yeah. And I prefer a revolver in a single action because it's very reliable.
In a single action? In
a single action. It's a 454 Casull. It's very reliable. I like that. I just like that reliability and that I can really count on it, depend on a good strong handgun, put some good stiff loads in it. That's an advantage too. You can really load them up.
So you're not worried about thumbing that action back and getting your second shot?
Well, when you pull it, you can thumb it the first time. But often if you're that close, there's no second shot.
You're just going for that one and done. Do it right the first time.
Right. And so, no, I've been confident with it is all I can say. And you guys have been successful with them. They're reliable. They're not prone to corrosion. The one thing that I really recommend is you've got this nickel-plated brass. And we've got our ammo like this. And the stainless steel guns, you know how wet it is up there. Yeah. These tend to corrode into the chamber.
The typical brass
absolutely
case corrodes.
If you're cutting with a loaded chamber, that starts to corrode and you can have some extraction issue. If it's at all possible, use the nickel-plated brass.
So you do want the nickel. There you go,
absolutely.
Guys. Nickel-plated brass for weather concerns, huh?
Absolutely. If you can't, just be aware of it. Check wipe it off. Keep your ammo clean. But if you can use the nickel-plated brass, that's also.
How often, speaking of cleaning, how often do you clean your protection pistol, handgun, when you're up there, your revolver?
It's stainless.
Stainless, so you're just.
My holster covers it well. You'll see the design of the holster, but it covers it well and it's well protected, and it has never been an issue.
So it's not like every night you need to get that bugger cleaned out.
No, and also you got to use a little caution. It's cold up there. You get a good hard freeze, you've got it full of grease and oil, and you can freeze your gun up. And that's something else guys have been bringing me their bolt guns because they've been greased and oiled over the years. It dries in the bolt, and now they're getting misfires. They would find that out if they would go out before season and go to the range, but always be aware of that. And frequently in the cold weather hunting, we just use brake clean. You're not going to cycle the gun enough times to wear it out.
So you don't even worry about lubricating it. clean it with brake cleaner to get all the oil and grease out of it?
Yes, and keep it clean because you're just getting. Because what are you going to shoot once, twice?
Yeah.
You should. I mean, five.
Yeah.
It's not going to wear it out in 5 shots, right?
Right.
And so you don't want that in there. If you want to use a little grease here or there and use it very sparingly or oil, go right ahead. But don't over lubricate it and make sure you've got it genuinely clean, especially inside the bolt where the striker spring and everything is.
Yeah.
The Ruger has those 2 cutouts in the bottom of the bolt, and it's just too easy to stick a nozzle in there and hose it down. It's not what you need to do. So.
All right. So, God, this really surprises me that you're shooting a single action revolver. I would have thought you'd wanted to have double action on this stuff. Have you ever had to shoot a bear in self-defense?
No, I haven't. I'm glad to say I haven't. But, I mean, I'm mentally, I'm always prepared to. But I'm not anticipating, you just don't have that kind of time. And it'll be a few shots. Also, these heavier recovering revolvers, I mean, you kind of need to hang on to them to keep them under control.
Yeah.
and these bigger bores. And that's something, boy, the first time I shot that, I thought, what have I let them talk me into? This was, and as I got more accustomed to it and ran a few thousand rounds through it, I got a little,
Yeah, that reminds me when I was a kid and went to Alaska the first time. I took a 44 Rem mag along thinking I'm going to defend myself from bears. And fortunately, happily, I didn't have to. But while I was up there with all the 50-gallon drums that used to be lying around everywhere up there, I thought, let's pretend that's a grizzly bear. And even though it's not moving, I'm just going to see how many shots I can get into him with this revolver, which I hadn't practiced with very much, not nearly enough. So I just started going with a double action, wham, wham, wham. I think I hit it once in the bottom, once in the top edge, and then in the air.
Right.
The rest of the shots from the recoil.
And that's, the critical in your training is your target, your front sight pull, and get that mentally you're putting that front sight back on the target and firing.
Yeah.
It isn't just,
Yeah, it's not just bang, 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 bang. You've got to control it and get your shots on there.
And with that kind of recoil you get out of these handguns, they want to move on you.
So do you think it's possible then, or inadvisable to get too powerful of a round, like the 500 Smith & Wesson or the 460 or the 480 Ruger? You think those are too big for people to handle?
No, I don't. But I think you need to be a handgunner to really know how to use that. Because I remember the big X frames came out. Guys loved them. 500 Smith & Wesson. They carried them one season. They wouldn't carry them anymore. They were too big, too heavy, too bulky, too long. Too much of a holster. They were carrying a rifle and then something as heavy as a rifle. They wouldn't carry them. So make sure it's something you're going to carry.
Yeah.
Compact enough and comfortable enough, and you can comfortably shoot.
So what do you think? What's your specific piece? Is it a Ruger single?
Yeah, Ruger single action.
Yeah.
Stainless steel.
What does that thing weigh?
I mean, 2 pounds or so.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you think would be, say, 3 acceptable handguns that you would say would be okay for bear protection?
I used to carry a 357 Smith & Wesson model 65-1. Now, the police carried those a lot, so there's a bunch of them on the surplus market. Fixed sights. It's a small frame, 357 with buffalo bore bear loads. That's something, and it's adequate. It's kind of, no matter what you have, you're going to want more. And that's what my friend told me. He said he wouldn't have been comfortable anything short of a howitzer when he was being charged. He said it just doesn't feel like enough. But having something is critical, and then being willing to use it and knowing how to use it.
Well, it sounds to me like the most critical thing, based on what you're telling me and what Phil Shoemaker has told me about his 9mm, is that hard cast, heavy for caliber bullet. Don't worry about your velocities. Just have that hard cast bullet that can penetrate.
Absolutely, but you need to worry a little bit about your velocities because guys like to load their rounds hot. Then you have extraction problems, and you have cycling problems.
Too hot.
So, and do not go into the field with any round that you have not put into your firearm.
Cycle those through.
You absolutely, it fits, it's going to turn. But especially in a revolver, you run really hot rounds, you get a primer that bulges back, now it doesn't want to turn.
Locked up.
Yeah, it's not playing nice. So don't use the hottest rounds you can load. Use something that's going to work every time. It has to be reliable.
That is excellent advice. A friend of mine told me a rifle. I can't remember what he was shooting, but he had the hot load. Primer came out the back, jammed up his action. He's done.
He's done.
Yeah, he's done. Hadn't been for his buddy, Mr. Bear would have been there.
Yeah. And also, doing reloads, don't overuse your brass. I had a customer bring me a Heim double that he had as a 375 H&H head separation. And so he was going to go, he had a hunting Kodiak in a few days. So just something on hand loading is don't go as hot as you can.
Yeah, good advice. So what would you say, Morris, would be a minimum handgun to even bother trying to shoot a bear with?
I would at least lean towards a 357, 44 mags, but with the right bullets. The bullet construction is so critical. If you're using hollow points, pretty much doesn't matter what you're using. It's not enough. They won't go deep enough. But there's an interesting story. Heard from a trooper friend of mine. There was a couple on their honeymoon, rented a remote cabin. There was a brown bear that just, in the morning, they're having their coffee, and he just kept trying to break into the windows, and he was really aggressive about this. And so they tried to scare him off and bang pin, the usual things you would do to just to kind of send him on his way. And he was having none of that. And so they ended up getting outside. They had a 22, I think it was a Colt Woodsman or something. It was a 10-shot 22, a semi-auto. And they got on the roof. The bear's trying to get him on the roof.
They were on the roof.
They finally crawled up on the roof to get away from it. And the husband said, I saw some hunters over at the lake. I'm going to make a run for them. And hopefully the bear will chase me. I'll leave you alone, but I'm going to try to make a run for this. So he runs over to the lake, and the hunters came back with him. By then, the bear had been chewing on her and drug her off the roof, and they could see her bloody drag marks of her hands. So the bear was eating her when she was still alive, and drug her out in the field, and she was dead by the time they got back.
Whoa!
But they never even used the handgun.
They didn't even try to shoot it.
Absolutely not, and that's just sheer panic, and that's why I say keep your wits about you. I mean, the argument that, gosh, okay, is a 9mm enough? Well, it was for Phil.
Yeah.
But he kept his wits about it. And so just stay focused.
Yeah, and you hear stories about people having shot bears and killed them with 22 rimfires, which is what they had. Yeah. The base of the ear and the head kind of deal. Yeah. Better than nothing, and it's been proven in the past to work, so yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't be my first choice, but if that's all I had, I'm not going to just lay down.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's the one to give it a
Yeah, I mean, I could, when you think about it, you go, why would anyone bring a 22 rimfire handgun in a place like that? Well, I would, because I was probably thinking I'm going to shoot some grouse for dinner or snowshoe bear or something.
You bet. Yeah, absolutely.
But if you're really concerned about bears and you are really in bear habitat, like most of Alaska and Canada, it probably is smart to have a reasonably sized handgun, but not so big that you're not going to want to carry it.
And use it. You've got something you've got to be able to use and control.
And that's where the practice comes in as well as the setup.
And it's very possible you'll start out with like a 44 mag and then work up from there as you become more comfortable with the handgun or even a good 357. But you've got to start and you've got to know how to use it and pay attention. And also be thinking short range. These aren't, you're not going to be shooting hundreds of yards. These are close encounters.
Yeah.
I mean, even like getting out of your tent and answering the call of nature, they're there.
Yeah, I was like my buddy on that when I started this show. He's literally lying on his back with the screen of the tent and the mosquito screen right there, so he got some fresh air coming in, and he starts to smell this disgusting whatever this. He's having a dream about it, and when he opens his eyes, he is literally looking right in the mouth of a black bear.
Yeah, and they're curious, and some of them are just curious.
Yeah.
But some of them become aggressive, or if one's been following you for a long time, he's probably not so curious. He's probably on the menu. I'd be a little more suspicious. And
I always sort of tease people who get too afraid of black bears. I know guys who will not come out west hunting because they're afraid of black bears. And I always say, come on, black bears are really not a threat. Yeah, they've killed more people than grizzly bears. Well, that's because there's so many of them and we're more often in their habitat. But nonetheless, the point is, just because it's a calm little black bear doesn't mean it cannot decide to eat you.
Absolutely. But of course, you got to remember in Alaska, the grizzly bears and the brown bears are eating black bears. So they're a lot more aggressive than the bears I've encountered down here.
There you go.
They tend to be more aggressive. And so, not that everyone's a threat, but everyone should be respected. It isn't just a little friendly bear. Just be aware of them and kind of mark what they're doing. If they're coming towards you or going away or circling around, watch what they're doing there.
And it's always better to be prepared than otherwise.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Take advantage of the time You know you're going to go there. Be prepared.
Now, I want to get into what you're doing up there with your equipment and stuff, making your guns and all. Now, Morris, you, with all of your experience with bears and stuff, you're modifying your guns and your equipment a little bit. Isn't that part of your business?
Well, it is, but I started out, got in the American Gunmakers Guild back in the early 80s, the second year it was started. And so as a metalsmith, I was making dangerous game rifles. Mostly
You were?
Guys going to Africa or Alaska. But a bespoken rifle now is just north of 20 grand. Okay. And so that's not my budget.
Yeah.
I'm glad there are people that have a budget for that because I make them for them, but it's not in my budget. And so what is in my budget is the Ruger M77 Mark II. It's stainless steel. It's just a nice setup. It's got some shortcomings that we can work around, but it's a nice setup. But like the iron sights, for example, they're great, but you can't get to them with Ruger rings. So I make quick detachable rings for that. So you can pop your scope off, and that's what I do when I shoot a bear. I don't have a guy to say, go get that for me. He looks a little angry. I don't have that. It's like, give him the half an hour or more. You're going to go into thick brush.
So you take your scope
Take
off.
the sling off, take the scope off, take your pack off. If you're wearing a big heavy coat.
Take your coat off.
Yeah.
You're leaving your pants on, right?
You're leaving your pants on. You're not going native, but you're going for it. And that's how you go in there and get that. And then
So you're going to be using your open sights.
But this is close. This is 5 to 20 feet. I mean, that's more than a scope's useless pretty much.
Okay.
And then Phil brought me a floor plate and said, "Gosh, I can't get any of these made. Can you make some of these floor plates for me?"
A floor plate.
A drop floor plate that
Oh,
allows you to get in the 30-06 family of cartridges, like the 35 Whelen.
Yeah.
2 more rounds down. And in the 375 Ruger, the belted magnums, you can get 1 more round down. So you've got 4 down and 1 up in the Ruger 375.
Okay, so you want more firepower. You make that modification to your particular bear rifle.
Yes, and you just drive out a pen, put it on there, snap it shut. It's really simple installation. But you're right, and so that's what I have. I've got 5 rounds in my rifle. Take the scope off, take the sling off, because you're crawling under little short things. I mean, even this table isn't that high. A brown bear will go right under this. A big brown bear
will crawl right under that table.
And the black bears, they amaze me the places they've gone after they've been shot and get into the thickest brush they can
Well,
find.
now that you mention that, I shot a black bear once in Canada, and we were tracking it through the ferns and all the thick stuff you've been talking about, and ended up finding it under a Doug fir or some big tree like that had fallen, and it had gotten up underneath it, almost completely covered. We could just see a little black patch of hair. We dug him out from under there, and he had gone under a space probably like that.
Isn't it amazing what they can work their way through? Yeah. And they're not happy to see you because they know what's going to happen next.
Well, this guy was past being happy about anything.
Yeah, good. That's good. That's how
That's
you
the
wanna
way I
find
like to find him.
Yeah, and so once we shoot a bear, you get dead quiet, and you're listening for that death bellow.
Mm-hmm.
If you can hear that, and when you don't hear that, boy, your stress
you're worried,
level goes way up.
Yeah.
'cause you got your
Well, how many
hands
bears have you taken?
on. Over 20.
Mm-hmm.
Over 20.
That's a good number.
Yeah, and then of course with my friends, I'm skinning. I like to keep their bear. I really like to see them properly processed, properly skinned, and I don't care if it's a 4.5 footer. If you get it, cape it out, practice on that, because someday you're going to get that bear of a lifetime or trophy of a lifetime, and you'll know how to process it right, and you'll have a good mount.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Well, that's pretty cool. Now, do you have an actual business that you're still engaged in? You're not retired, are you?
No, I'm not retired. My business is Alaska Arms LLC. And
Alaska Arms?
Arms LLC, and I just manufacture the accessories for the rifles.
Accessories for rifles. The rings you mentioned?
The rings, and I make them also for CZs, and the Bruneau rifles out of Canada with the 19mm dovetails on the bridges.
Mm-hmm.
And then I make a Model 70 style trigger for Mausers.
A Model 70 style trigger for the Mauser 98.
Right.
Okay.
Nice crisp trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That keep you busy?
Oh gosh, day and night. It does. It's hard to get in my hunting time, but somehow I manage. Yeah.
Do a lot of Alaskans come to you for these modifications?
Amazingly, pretty much all the guides are using them.
Guides are using it.
Yeah, that's what they're putting on their guns. Sadly, as a guide, they get the second shot, and a lot of the hunters aren't prepared. So your viewers, if they're planning to go to Alaska, need to be prepared. You need to get their shooting down, and also there's a frame of mind, because as they see a bear, you can kind of it can kind of be unnerving for the first time when you think how big they are, and then you start to question your equipment and your skills and everything.
Yeah.
So kind of be ready for that mentally. I took a friend of mine hunting, and where I hunt, we can get 7 bears a year.
7 bears.
5 black bears and 2 brown bears.
That is a pile of bears, folks.
But they don't come in order. And so I like to have a rifle big enough, for whatever shows up.
Sure.
So a friend of mine, take him out there, and kind of a small black bear shows up, but he'd never shot one. And so I said, okay, there's your bear. Go ahead and shoot it. And he's like, oh, no, he's huge. He's got to be like 12 feet. No, he's not. I think you can do it. This gun isn't big enough. And we had kind of a conversation. And finally he shot it. And we get down on the ground. And he's like, boy, they're a lot smaller down here. And that was just strictly, he was so excited that it looked like a monster. But yeah, so be aware of that and kind of mentally prepared for it, and stay calm, place your shots well.
But I like what you said about they don't come in order. So, in other words, the smart approach is to get big enough for the biggest one,
Yes.
not say, well, I'm just going to take a small black bear. All I need is a 30-30.
Yeah, no, that's not a good approach.
Good approach.
It might work sometime, but eventually it's going to catch up with you.
Yeah, you need to prepare for the worst case scenario.
Right. And know how to use that equipment. And there's also, I'm hearing a lot of concern from guys. They'll call me up and say, boy, this is a pretty big round, this 375. Well, it's considered a small big bore.
Yeah.
It's not considered a huge big bore. But if you need to do your own reloading, load the rounds down a little bit, you can get your trigger time in, become accustomed to it. Always finish your session with a full power round or two. Just mentally, you can do it. But it's not prohibitive.
Yeah, 375 H&H has long been a brown bear recommended up there. Back in the 50s and 60s when I was reading the magazines, all those guys were shooting a lot with that 375 H&H. But the 338 Win Mag seems to do just as well, doesn't it?
It's a lot higher velocity, and the tissue doesn't act quite the same when you hit them that fast and that hard. But they do shoot a fair number of them. You're giving up 50 grains on your bullet, so you're shooting a 250 grain rather than a 300. I know there's some 300s out there, but they tend not to be. And I just like that heavier bullet. And I've noticed, because I had a 338, typically when I hit them with a 375, there's a huge difference than if they're hit with a 30-06.
You can tell.
They just go down.
Really?
They just go down. And that difference, and there's not a huge difference in recoil. And so that's why I really like the bigger cartridge.
Well, speaking of recoil, I have never noticed it when I was shooting a bear or a moose.
And you won't.
Or an elk.
Yeah.
But I've shot a total of 1 brown bear with a 375 H&H and dropped him with the first shot. Well, it was a high shoulder shot, which is always a good shot on a bear because it pretty much spines
Clips
him
the
down
spine.
to go.
Yeah.
Then you'd give him a finisher.
Right.
But you couldn't have told me I wasn't shooting a 22 long rifle for all the recoil I felt.
Yeah. No.
So don't freak out about that. Yeah, it's an easy round to shoot under pressure, especially.
And something, this 375 H&H is a fantastic round. Moderate pressures, that long tapered case feeds well.
Good point.
So you're not going to have feeding problems, and it extracts well. So it's a little bit lower pressures. It's a great round. You can drop down to 220s if you're going to go to Africa. Also, plains game.
Oh, yeah.
Take the scopes pop right off with my rings. Put on a different scope. Change scopes. Bring 2 scopes and 2 sets of ammo.
Yeah.
You've got your cape, your buffalo rifle or your dangerous game rifle, and then you've got your plains game.
So in Alaska, you could even say, I'm hunt sheep, but while I'm in the thick stuff, I can switch over and be prepared to, if a bear attacks me, I'll put the 300 grain bullet in.
You bet. You bet. Absolutely.
Yeah. Good versatile cartridge.
Amazingly so, and it's kind of overlooked because people are so fixated on that one cartridge that'll just do that one specific thing. And if you're going to bring one gun, that's really a good choice.
Good one to go.
Really a good choice.
What about the 45-70? So many guys say the ultimate guides protection gun, it seems like, is they're recommending that Marlin lever action on a 45-70. Do you see a lot of those up in Alaska?
Yes, but there's some limitations there. You figure it's a 40-yard rifle, and that's great. And if the guide it's close and you've got 40 yards, that's okay. What about for that bear that does break cover and takes off? It's out there 200-300 yards. That's not enough. And you still have to get that bear, put as much lead in him as possible, so that when you do find him, he doesn't have much fight, or hopefully no fight left in him. So that's got some limitations, and so I wouldn't bet the farm on it. It's not a bad round if you're in a stand, heavy cover, 40 or yard shot or less. Yeah, maybe not bad.
Well, what about for the guys who say, well, look, I just want it for protection, so I'm going to probably be shooting at 10 yards, maybe 20 at most. But I always say, well, do you really want to carry a 7-8 pound rifle around all day, every day while you're fishing and berry picking and things for a defense rifle?
The romance is going to wear out pretty fast. It's bulky, it's big, it's in the way. You've taken away one of your hands. You're trying to do everything one-handed. There's some disadvantages to that.
Yeah.
I definitely, it's not the path I would go.
Yeah, I could see where it would make sense for your guide, for instance. He's with you to protect you from problems, advising you on fishing, but he's not running the fly rod. He's not
right, and he knows the range. But also those bears, when they're wet, that bullet getting through that wet hair and any sand or glacial silt or volcanic ash that's in their fur, that bullet's got to get through that. And so
Not your favorite, it sounds like.
No, but I mean, I wouldn't object if you're just somebody who's just going to just keep an eye on you. You're on a river. It's going to be close range. That's his job. Great.
Well, then we've got to go with the shotgun slugs, because people are always saying, why mess around with any rifle? Why don't you just go with a 12 gauge and a slug?
I thought that. So a friend of mine was on the SWAT team in Alaska, and he said the worst round he saw was the slug when it hit somebody. They didn't act like they were hit.
Really?
Yes, he said he saw holes in people where you could see the rifling. The guys didn't die. Maybe take out their shoulder blade or something on the way out, and they just didn't go down. And that was the least favorite round that he had, would be a shotgun slug. You're in a big. It's big. It's unwieldy once again. You can put a lot of rounds in it, but that makes it heavy. Those are heavy rounds.
Yeah.
And then he just said any time he'd seen it used, he was not impressed. He thought he could do a lot better.
Well, if I remember right, Joseph and I, a couple of years ago, did some testing with some typical bear rounds. And just because we have firewood around here, I said, let's just shoot some into some maple logs, because they're really hard. Obviously, you're not replicating a bear or anything else, but let's just see relative to one another how they penetrate, et cetera, et cetera. And we got to the 12 gauge, and we were really checking two things: penetration of the bullet through that really hard medium, but also how far does it knock that log over? Because so many people think all that energy is what's knocking the bear down or over. And we wanted to show how little energy is actually affecting that log. And we would stand I would say they were 8 to 12 inch diameter logs standing on top of another log, so they were ready to fall. How seldom any of them got knocked over. And I'm trying to remember, we should probably check our video on it. I'm sorry, guys, I forget these things because I do so many of these, but I'm thinking with that 12 gauge, you barely knocked it over, let alone blew it back and all these.
No, I've known guys that would carry buckshot and slugs just to deter an attack. It wouldn't be my first choice. If that's what you're really comfortable with, fine. But it's something.
Yeah.
But there's more.
Yeah. Okay.
There's more and there's better.
Morris, we had started earlier discussing where I asked you what your recommendations would be, and we got a little bit sidetracked when you started talking about your single action, and it kind of surprised me. What two other handguns do you think would be effective for the average hunter going up there wanting bear protection, is not a super experienced handgunner, and probably will not practice enough to really be able to handle, say, a 454 Casull, let alone a 500. You said the 500 is too big and heavy already. So what are two really good options? Give me a fairly light one, sort of your bare minimum, that people would carry and at least have something.
Right. Even for like the wife or even the younger kids, your teenagers, they should have a gun. They're bait. They're edible.
Yeah.
So have them prepared. But that 357, Smith & Wesson makes it just a gorgeous little 65-1. It was used by a lot of police departments. There's a lot of them used out there. They're affordable. It's a small frame 357 revolver. It is double action, but that's a great place to start with the right bullets. You never, ever use a hollow point. And Buffalo Boar makes a bear load, nice big meat plat on there. Use a good premium bullet.
Okay.
It's worth it, and you will never regret that.
Do you have any idea what the weight would be on that little handgun? That little revolver?
It feels like it's under a pound. It doesn't feel all that heavy. It may be a little bit more than that, but I think just having that security there, because it is a small frame, so it's not bulky. It's not beating the tar off of you. It's comfortable.
Okay. Where would you carry it?
I like a shoulder holster that I always keep on top, and I don't anchor it. And we'll do a video on that, and I'll show you how mine is set up and why it's set up that way. But however you carry it, you have to be able to get to it. And these chest holsters, and now you've got a couple, 3 or 4 layers on top of that. That's not accessible.
No.
You're just carrying weight.
Yeah.
And for the amount of time you have to get to it, it's not accessible.
It pretty much has to be like the old Hollywood gunslingers.
You
fast draw. I mean, that bear's on you. He's on you.
Right. And so the holster is also part of that equation to be able to get that out.
So, starting with a 357 Magnum, next step up, somebody who can handle a little
nice
more recoil.
629 stainless steel, 44 Smith & Wesson. A nice choice. And now they have them 3-inch barrels. They're compact. They're a little heavier. Of course, it's a bigger frame. But it's something that, well, my friend stopped a charge with it and took out a bear with it. But he had the right bullets. But that would be kind of a step up.
But you said 3.5-inch barrel, so you don't need a big long barrel. We're not. Once again, you're not thinking of trajectory and maximizing your ballistic performance and all the rest of it. You need fast action. Get that slug into that.
Get
bear.
that front sight on it. It's going to be close range. Hopefully not powder burns on the hide, but I mean it's going to be tight.
Yeah.
And so you don't need a big barrel. You just need have something you can use quickly and get out quickly.
So 357 Magnum, 44 Rem mag, and your top dog that you're carrying.
The one
around?
that I use is the 454 Casull.
Okay.
There's the 480, which is a fantastic
40
round.
Ruger.
But once I shot the 454, I thought, my gosh, what have I just got myself into? And so I'm kind of good there. Now, maybe after, if I have to use it tight a few times, I might think I want a bit more. But for now, I'm just happy with that.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, Morris, for stopping in and visiting with me on all of this.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
You say it was Alaska Arms is your machining
Alaska
business?
Arms LLC.
Yeah.
Is my
Okay.
website.
So, folks, if you're heading up to Alaska or even someday planning to, or just coming out west, we're getting more and more grizzly bears around the Yellowstone ecosystem into Montana and Idaho. It's probably a good idea to be prepared, and even if it's just a black bear, I don't think you're going to be too happy if one of them decides he wants to have you for lunch. So consider these things and get yourself a tool that you will carry with you and get into action quickly. Not some Magnum super-powered thing that could take out a dinosaur if you just had 4 more guys to help you carry it.
Right.
And if you're ever up in Alaska and you want to get your Rugers especially tricked out, talk to this gentleman here at Alaska Arms, and I think he's got some pretty good sound advice based on experience up in the Northwoods. All right. So thanks so much for listening. I invite you to tune in to Ron Spomer Outdoors, where Morris is going to be demonstrating both his handgun, his holster, his whole setup, as well as his Ruger Hawkeye rifle in
375 H.
375 H&H. We're going bear hunting.
Or 375 Ruger, excuse me.
Oh, 375 Ruger, even better.
375 Ruger.
Okay. So until next time, this is Ron Spomer. Hunt honest and shoot straight.